right, man, let's talk. So apparently 97 won the ticket. They're rumored to be saying that the Detroit Pistons and Detroit Lions have some issues going on in their organization between Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell on roster decisions. They did have a difference of opinion for the first time. Now, Detroit media, especially the Detroit Lions, they have a rocky relationship. So could this be 97 won the ticket being divisive? I mean, it could be. But I knew, like, this ain't the first time they had issues with the roster, in my opinion. This is not the first time they had issues with their roster. I know for a fact they had issues with their roster. To keep it a bean, I know they had issues when they was beefing over James Houston. Brad loved James Houston. Dan Campbell couldn't stand him, and eventually James Houston found his way off the Detroit Lions. Now, he had a fairly productive year with Dallas last year, so it's not surprising. I mean, feel like we all know this. I say it sometimes, that they were two separate hires. They wasn't hired as a package deal. They didn't be like, okay, Brad, we gonna let you gonna be the GM, the president, whichever you're gonna call it. You're gonna run the operation, and you're gonna be able to pick your own head coach. No, they hired Brad, and then they hired Dan, and they put them together. Now, they boasted about or talked about their great working relationship before. I mean, but you can hire two people together and they can have a difference of opinion. That's the crazy thing about it. We can have two friends that grew up from the sandbox together, two brothers that came out the same womb together as twins, a brother and a sister, two sisters, and we still can have a difference of opinion or a difference of agreement. So, in my opinion, that's going to happen, especially when things don't go the way you want them to go. You always, no matter if you work together, y'all play together, it's always, or y'all as close as y'all think y'all are. Only time really shows, can y'all make it through disagreements? That's when a relationship, you really, really know when y'all start to go through, some issues. So this may make that relationship that much more better, And sometimes things can be done or things can be said in a relationship that's irreparable, or it can never be the same, no matter how chummy or how cool you are. And sometimes it really ain't a thin line, because we know as men and as women, there are certain lines you just don't cross. There's certain things you do that the relationship can never be what it once was. So you got to watch what you say, because even though if you say something, it's just out of hurt or just out of pain or just out of fear, even if you don't mean it, it can make a relationship, irreconcilable. You know what I'm saying? Or if y'all can salvage it or y'all can go on, it's not the same. You know what I mean? So of course I say all that, it's gonna be clashes. From the sandbox or we met in the parking lot, there's going to be clashes. There's going to be difference of opinion. It should not shock anybody that they're at a critical moment, whether this is going to be one of the greatest pivots in sports history if they can get a Super Bowl, or it's going to be one of those situations where you could say, we seen the window closing, and this is what happened when it nailed shut, and put some bars on the window. So it could be straight made up, because right now it's hard to get content. Ain't really much to talk about in the dead zone. You know what I'm saying? Basketball is on a steep decline, or it's on a decline. College basketball is rising with a bunch of great names in there, but we already know, they don't like to talk about basketball. They rather talk about baseball and get 3 viewers and talk about basketball. And basketball ain't doing too hot right now. So I wouldn't read much into it. I think it's healthy sometimes to have a difference of opinion. And I think it's very healthy sometimes to hear somebody else's opinion and get a different perspective. Too many times people don't want to hear people out and see it from their perspective and put themselves in their POV, right? So I'm not reading too much into it. Now, if the Lions have a bad season, or they, people, talk about blow this relationship up, they may point back to this moment they might point back to this moment and be like, see, you know, they might point back to this moment and be like, see, I told you. Their difference of opinion was trash. I told you. So that very may well can happen. So, I mean, I'm not reading too much in it. I think it's healthy. When you at this critical moment of your careers or your career, it's a make or break moment for the Lions. You know, in two different philosophies of football. I just know that Brad Holmes don't really care for defensive ends. You know, that's just what it is. He don't care about the D-line at all anyway. You know, think about it. I mean, they talk about the trenches. There's two positions that he really, really loved, if you ain't really noticed. One is he loved the cornerback position, which at one point was very refreshing. Because we had regimes in Bob Quinn and Martin Mayhew. They didn't believe in corners, and Martin Mayhew was a fucking defensive back. That's what was so crazy about it. And then we have the inaugural, everybody that comes to the organization love this position, the wide receiver. Yeah, if you didn't know, when he first got here, he tried to move up in the draft and draft Jamar Chase. Let's not forget that when he first got here, they wasn't trying to get Penei Sewell. They was trying to move up and get Jamar Chase. And once he figured out he didn't have enough draft capital, or that Jamar Chase really wanted to play with Joe Burrow, he was like, yeah, fuck that. I ain't doing all that. I think next year he moved up and got Jameson Williams. The rumor was he was moving up to get Garrett Wilson. That was the rumor. He was moving up to get Garrett Wilson. So, I mean, he's moved up and got Isaac Tesla. He loves receivers. He loves defensive backs. I feel like he was in a situation where he had to draft Aiden Hutchinson. And despite seeing, how well Houston performed without an offensive line, and how well their defensive front wreaked havoc, you would think, hey, we want that in Detroit. And Detroit is usually known, even through the down years, to have really good defensive linemen. Sean Rogers, Robert Porcher, Luther Ellis, Ndamukong Suh. They usually have some disruptors. Cliff Averill. Ziggy Ansah had a moment. Willie Young had some moments in Detroit. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, man. But I really wouldn't read too much into this. Men, we have friction. Men, we have difference of opinion. But, men, we able to come to a compromise. You know what I'm saying? They should be able to come to a compromise. But I would push back on this is their first disagreement. I know that for a fact it's not. Everything ain't peachy when you come to a situation and you win 2 games your first year in a draw. I think it was a draw in 2 games. Everything ain't peachy. And I know for a fact I've seen them, if you read between the lines, they have beef over James Houston. They have beef over James Houston. I'm telling you that right now. I know that for a fact. If it was up to Brad Holmes and Brad Holmes himself, he would have kept James Houston on the roster. I'm telling you, he would have preferred to keep James Houston on the roster. Dan did not like James Houston. So just reading between that lines, you think they ain't had other disagreements? You're crazy, bro. That's like, women looking at, other women and seeing on Instagram or social media or one of them television shows that, oh, they look so beautiful. They probably never argue. Yeah, the fuck they do. Yeah, they do. They have arguments. They have disagreements. And sometimes those be the most volatile relationships. So I just don't really be getting, people be thinking, like, we're human nature. We're going to clash. And they're clashing. And there are probably votes. Oh, I think this and I think that. There's probably, who knows? They voting, oh, I don't believe this and I don't believe that and this, that. I'm telling you that right now. Like, ain't nothing perfect. No matter how good you think somebody's relationship is or they work a relationship, how close they are, you're you'll be surprised. The bond is strong because of the arguments and the fights they had, and then they have a beer or then they have a sandwich. You know, that's just what it is. But, you know, I ain't really putting too much into it, man. They've been beefing with the Detroit Lions, so this could be divisive activity here. This could be divisive activity. So, thumbs up the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, check out Detroit Lions Talk playlist. Hit the link in the description. Follow me on X, Facebook, Kick, Twitch, Instagram, Spotify, Anchor, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. Appreciate the love and support. Peace.